Testing audio, testing. Okay, so the issues with the owl. Let's go back to.
Could be the chief's son as well.
Oh, man.
In the interest of efficiency and time, I'm going to go ahead and read the land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on a territory of the Huchu, the ancestral unceded land of the Churchill, speaking alone of people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Corona band of the Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Corona band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Showdown, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. This brings us to call to order. Roll call.
Okay. I'll start with Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris is absent, leave of absence. Board Member Lockwood.
Here.
Board Member Levine.
Here.
Chair Moore.
Here.
And Board Member Owens.
Here.
Okay, all present, we have the quorum. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Investigator Wetcher, and myself, Jose Murillo. On behalf of the BPD, we have Lieutenant Montgomery. And do we have a BPA rep today? Oh, it's switched over. Sorry, that threw me off for a bit. And then we do have staff on behalf of the City Attorney's Office. We have City Attorney Chang, Deputy City Attorney Chang, excuse me. Okay.
Excellent. That brings us to agenda item number 2, approval of agenda. Does anyone have any questions or concerns? Anything that would like to be moved or changed?
I move we approve it.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Don't see or hearing any objections to that. We're going to go ahead and move forward. And that takes us to agenda item number 3, public comments.
Okay, as we have done, we will first start with speakers who are physically present, and then we will move on to those who are present here virtually. At this time, are there any members physically present who would like to speak? Okay, and just one moment while I share the timer. And your 3 minutes have started.
3 minutes. That's an abundance. Hi, my name is Betsy Morris. I'm have the honor of being the co-convener of the Berkeley East Bay Gray Panthers, senior advocacy group that tackles a lot of justice issues when we can. And I'm also a member of Friends of Adeline, a South Berkeley group. I'm here to support the legacy that you're carrying, the history, the voters who voted for the Police Accountability Board. I want to thank all of you for going through that rigorous, at least even on my end, it was a rigorous process of getting onto this board because it's so important. And I just want to vouch for, as a voter, as a citizen, as a resident of West Berkeley, for, I don't know, going on 30 years now, Berkeley, West Berkeley, just how much I value the meaning of that charter change. And I know it's new territory and I'm wishing you luck and accountability. I especially want to speak up, and I mean this with respect for all the working people here. Would never want to interfere with someone in their job, but this task of policing of what is public safety, I am extemporaneizing here, but I want to say I support the accountability, I support the independence of this group, and I was disappointed that there was not a public hearing and that your role as reviewing the new police chief, extremely important role, was not really upheld. And you may feel differently, but that's how I observed it and experienced it. That we all need to find support for this, what is public safety, in a way that is not biased, that truly takes into account all the ways in which people in Berkeley can be harmed. I just appreciate your work showing up here tonight and would like to see your work respected and honored as a truly independent commission, if that's possible. And I also just know that we're very lucky to have a responsive, often, innovative police force. And I know we're all going to do right. Especially, I just want to point out, there's an entire festival going on next door where if anyone needs dinner, they're serving some dinner. So just, to come in here and be in this room for a few hours, that's hard work. So hopefully everyone gets a break. Anyway, thank you all very much. My first time in person at one of these, and I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Okay. Any additional members? With that said, we could proceed to virtual public comment. Listing the attendees up. Okay, we currently have 2 speakers with their hands raised. Kit Saginor, you have been granted permission to speak.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I'm attending online or through Zoom this time, hoping I can control the volume better and will be able to hear you. And thank you very much for dealing with the audio issues so that we can hear. I wanted to comment on several meetings ago, you had a wonderful training on EIS, and your speaker presented great information. I was very happy to see that the slides from that are in the agendas for that date. And I noticed that in some jurisdictions, the accountability body is really closely involved in how EIS systems operate. I suspect it will not be that way in Berkeley, but I do hope that you will have a really strong role. Well, I more than hope, I'm asking you to push for a strong role in setting up a really robust and useful EIS. I also noticed that the EIS systems are very useful to the officers who participate, who get feedback, sometimes get work noticed for commendation that would not otherwise come to the attention of other folks. So I really hope that the Berkeley Police Department is really positive about putting this in place for Berkeley in a way that will make their jobs more effective and easier, and it will be a really helpful thing for the city. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing progress in that area as well as all the other things that you work on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Rivka, you should have permission to speak.
Yes, thank you. Just want to say that at the city council meeting last night, there was a lot of concern expressed and hopes that the PAB will be able to exercise its full powers under the charter. Chief Lewis spoke very genuinely about intending to see that that happens, and I was glad to hear that, and I really hope that you all can work toward a collaborative, respect on both sides relationship that can lead us forward in a positive direction. So thank you for the PAB and the director and Chief Lewis for all your hard work. And I look forward to a productive future of collaboration among all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, are there any additional members of the public who would wish to speak? Okay, I do not see any additional hands raised.
Yeah, that takes us to agenda item number 4. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting, April 26, 2023. Has anyone seen any changes, corrections, additions that we need to apply?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. So seeing or hearing any objections to that, we're gonna move to agenda item number 5. I'm gonna let the WPA staff take over for reporting.
Good evening, Chair and board members. Thank you for joining us and being patient with our technical difficulties today. Just some housekeeping items for members of the public that are here. We have some face masks, they're not required. We also have some COVID test kits. There is an expiration date on the box, but we also put out a flyer that the FDA has extended that expiration date, so you are still able to use them. Just want to make sure that you're aware of that. We got it from the health department. Please feel free to take any if you need them. The other thing, as we mentioned, as a community members mentioned, yesterday was the appointment of Chief Lewis. I just want to say publicly congratulations to the chief. Our work still continues, and I know that we're committed to working together to promote public trust. It's very important that we stand in solidarity with the community and show them that we can achieve a city that serves all of us. So just want to make sure that we're all in unison. That it was there were a lot of different viewpoints from community members, but I think we're now at a place in leadership where we have to make sure that we're able to follow through on our mission of promoting public trust. So I'm committed to that. I know the board is, and I know the chief will be as well. The other thing I want to mention is I gave you a preview. Our new investigator was going to be joining us last week. We went to a constitutional policing conference, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I gave you a brief bio. In the agenda, we have his full bio, and he's here today. And I'm really excited to have him be part of our team. I've been watching Mr. Jason Wechter from afar and seeing the contributions he makes to our field. As I mentioned, he's one of the faces that usually pops up when a new jurisdiction is setting up their new oversight agency. He's there to teach him about the mechanics of civilian oversight investigations. He's well versed in this field, but I want to turn it over to him to introduce himself.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just very happy and thrilled and honored to be here for this comparatively new Police Accountability Board. And mentioned, I go way back in civilian oversight. I began working at the office of San Francisco Office of Citizen Complaints just about the same day Barbara Tard, former Berkeley Police Review Commission officer from about 25 years ago, did. So our involvement dates back to the same time, but it's been the great passion of my professional life. Have you seen from the bio, I've done a number of different types of investigation, the public and private sector, but this is what motivates me the most and what I'm most passionate about. And Berkeley is one of the oldest continuously operating oversight entities, celebrating 50 years last month. Is something to be very proud of. So everything I've seen so far, this is my third day in the office, about the staff and about the procedures and the training the Director Aguilar has arranged for this board has impressed me tremendously. So thank you for the opportunity to do this work here.
Welcome.
Thank you. If you haven't noticed or haven't received an email, there is a NAPO webinar taking place on May 18th. And that will be on the subject of bias in interpretation of video evidence. Please let us know if you'd like to participate. We'll sign you up for it. You can't sign up directly, but make sure you let me know and then send the invoice so we can make sure that we are reimbursing for that. Also, a gentle reminder, the NAPO annual conference will take place later this year, November 12th to the 16th. They should be opening up on May 15th. So that's just a gentle reminder to, if you're interested, please let us know so we make those accommodations for you and make sure that we're able to set that budget aside. So regarding accommodations, we contacted the BPD. They have provided to us. I have provided you the digital copies, and I've also printed out some physical copies for you. So make sure you remind me before you leave today. And we should probably, I'm not too familiar with the process that you did last time, so there'll be some education for me to assist you in whatever way we can. I don't know if you set up a subcommittee or if you did that in the full board level. So I'm interested to see how that process is. Okay, I want to stop it there before we just give our overview on our constitutional policing conference. If anybody has any questions on those items so far. Okay. Are you able to get it or?
I haven't received it on my email yet.
Okay. It's the May 5th. It was, are you able to look up the emails or?
Yes.
So I think the May 5th one on Friday or the Thursday. But while Jose is pulling up the PowerPoint, it is in the packet. If you can go to page 17. There's a little packet from the Institute for Constitutional Police. And so this was a conference that was originally a legal conference for different practitioners that are either constitutional policing advisors or city attorneys or prosecutors, but now they open it up to other individuals in the field. I believe this might have been the first time that they opened it up to other individuals. Jason and I had the opportunity to participate last week, and we were we were not the only oversight entity. We saw some colleagues from other places, to include Alexandria, Virginia, and Fairfax, Virginia, and some folks are doing some work in Seattle. So there's a lot of practitioners from around the country. There was also some representation from California, from San Diego. But if you look at that packet, it has really good concepts and definitions on what they mean by constitutional policing and constitutional legality, and different concepts that are relevant to our field. I want to also, though, just open it up to our investigator who was in attendance. to see if he has any impressions that he wants to share from the conference or anything he learned.
I was very impressed with it, in particular with the fact that there were so many people there whose responsibility is to either train police officers or advise police departments on their training. And the organizer, Bruce Allen Barnard, who is not a former police officer, but spent 20 years in the military and they worked as the search and seizure expert, I think, for Homeland Security. So there's great familiarity with police officers enforce the law, feels that generally police officers receive an adequate level of training on laws of search and seizure, issues around the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, which they're carrying out those responsibilities every day. They make more decisions than any judge does. So he's a strong advocate for more thorough and detailed training. So it was very heartening to see the people who are going to be doing that training are responsible for guiding their law enforcement agencies compliance with the Bill of Rights, present there and coming up to date and seeing the cutting edge thoughts in the field.
And one of the other organizers was Lila Saidia. She is currently still the legal instructor at the Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Training Academy. So she was actually my legal instructor when I went to the police academy. I think she trained me well, but it was good to see her there and hear more about these important concepts. Are you able to, if you could go to just a few slides so we can just show what the lineup was for, you go to next slide, So this is the full list of the course presented. We're actually going to get more material from the conference that's going to be sent to us. So as soon as we get it, we'll make it available to the board members. Go to the next slide. So this was the Tuesday lineup. If you go back. Tuesday, they did a general overview of what they meant by constitutional policing and constitutional legality, First Amendment and social media, Fourth Amendment, the objective reasonableness, and the equal protection clause. Next slide, please. Brady and Giglio issues and prosecutors and politics and policing. They showed us a case study. Interestingly enough, it was from Fairfax, where actually served with who's now the Commonwealth Attorney. And the case study they showed was the Commonwealth Attorney was entering the courthouse, and there was some sort of miscommunication, some dispute between the Commonwealth Attorney and the security guard, and they elevated up to the sheriff. And at one point, there was a report written about the incident. So the Commonwealth Attorney actually recommended for the prosecutor, for the deputy to be on the Brady list because of a perceived misrepresentation of the report that he did on that incident. So we discussed it as a group, whether that was appropriate, whether the mechanics of all of the issues and the legality of utilizing that tool in that way. But that's the kind of discussions we had there. We talked about building cultural bridges, raising the legality bar, the use of force, the swinging pendulum. In that particular percentage, Ashley is very, his last name, can you? Heiberger. Ashley Heiberger is also very active in the NACO community, and he goes to the different conferences, and I know he's also working with Jason, correct?
Yes, and he's a retired police captain who also has his JD, though he chose not to practice law, and is considered one of the experts on use of force laws.
There was one session that I had to miss out, but I heard that it was probably the most contentious one. It was working under a consent decree. I wasn't in the room, but I don't know if you had any impression from that discussion or.
Just that working on the consent decree means that the community essentially loses control to a federal judge, and the Department of Justice examines everything. it's something you want to avoid. You want to avoid having the kind of egregious behavior that generally brings DOJ in where they find pattern of practice of inappropriate police practices. But they have been, I guess there are 8 currently around the country, maybe a little more. Oakland is none of the consent decree under negotiated settlement agreement, but Detroit, I'm just forgetting some of the others. I think maybe Portland aren't in consent decrees because of the systematic problems in the law enforcement agencies.
Next slide. Building community leaders, communities and leaders, warriors to guardians, still part of the public discussion. Implicit bias in the science, what do we really know? Implicit bias in use of force. And not all of these sessions weren't necessarily taught by former law enforcement. There were sociologists, psychologists, or a lot of different backgrounds teaching these different concepts. Benchmarking was discussion, I think, led by the Center for Police and Equity. And they spoke about the different ways to do benchmarking. Next slide. Building trust, eliminating lawful but awful, police and practice and policies, professionalism in police and unions, understanding the dichotomy, identifying, overcoming obstacles to legitimacy, identifying and understanding the barriers, recruiting, training, data, and accountability, essential components of the agency and constitution of policing program. So it was a really robust conference, and we got to participate. As I mentioned, once we get the additional material, we'll be glad to share with the board. I think we're good to go there. I believe that's all we had for, these were our fellow oversight practitioners. So we had Richard Schott, who is an independent policing auditor of Fairfax. He actually retired from the FBI from Quantico as a legal use of force instructor. And then when I was in Fairfax, we picked him up to be our auditor. Stephen Richardson is was appointed as the executive director last year. Mummy Ibrahim is the police and auditor for Arlington County, and Kim Neal, police and auditor for the city of Alexandria in Virginia. Any other staff reports that you want to mention, or?
Yesterday, we had the opportunity, or rather, we were invited to present at the Hope Center. We were able to give a presentation about the work of the Police Accountability Board, our office, and how we work together with the department. We did get into the data aspect of it with the VP's transparency portal, which was very, which had a lot of community interest behind it, and just that as a general tool that's accessible and more people being interested. We also received a lot of good community feedback about ways that we can better reach out to the community. So we're looking forward in the coming months, and just in general as a part of our work moving forward, to be able to have more of those interactions with the community, to be able to share our work and give the community just general updates about what's going on within the city of Berkeley and policing.
And they have a beautiful center. If you haven't been, it's right around the corner from here. And they have opened up or invited us anytime we want to have an event that we can host it over there. So might be a good opportunity to have a public forum or some type of event where it's a little bit less formal and giving community members opportunity to talk to the board members and to the staff in a more open format.
Excellent. So that takes us to agenda item 6, which is chair and board members' reports. I'm going to go ahead and jump on this quickly, and let me first say that I want to acknowledge congratulations to our new permanent chief of police, Jim Lewis. I look forward to continuing the collaboration and working together as we move towards even more transparency and accountability in the city of Berkeley. That being said, I also want to keep my comments brief this evening, but it's important that I recognize one of our board members who is leaving us. This is her last meeting. That is Board Member Levine. Board Member Levine has been a pillar of this board and has been dogging it in her commitment to you know, to the commitment that we've all signed up for, but at the same time, you know, to me, you have been inspiration in the way that you've handled yourself with grace and humility, the way that you've been able to tackle the hard conversations. I will greatly miss your advice and your counsel in this board. And I wanted to acknowledge that before I got started saying anything else. So, you know, thank you.
Very much, thank you.
And if you'd like to say anything right now, this.
Well, I'll just say that this has been a marvelous experience for me. This is a uniquely collaborative, good listening group of people who each very diligently worked and contributed very constructively. We didn't always agree, but I felt like everybody listened to the other members' views. And some of us, including me, changed his mind, her mind, when we thought we were wrong. So that's kind of amazing to me. And I think this board is unique and very powerful in that regard. Miss everybody, but I certainly invite everybody to remain friendly with me as a co-citizen of Berkeley, which I'll continue to do probably till my dying day. So, yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Chip, for your
Thank you for your
gracious comments.
And at the same time, this folds me into my next point. It was brought to my attention that Councilmember Humper was used some interesting language when he talked about the Police Accountability Board. And I would like to make a formal request as an invitation for the council member to come to one of our meetings, to sit in, to know that we're not a bunch of kooks, but we take our jobs very seriously. Yeah,
It's a motion.
that's a motion. Yes, sir.
So-
second your motion.
Okay, so on the motion to invite Councilmember Humbert to a Police Accountability Board meeting. Moved by Chair Moore, second by Board Member Calavita. And I'll proceed to a roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris is absent, Board Member Lefkovich,
Yes.
Board Member Levine,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes,
and Board Member Owens.
Yes.
The motion carries.
thank you. With that, I'm gonna open it up to any other board member who would like to have comments or speak at this time. Please, Board Member Owens.
Chair Moore, I wrote down some things because I didn't want to miss anything. So I wanted to address my many frustrations with oversight in the city of Berkeley. I applied for this position because I believe the city of Berkeley had a strong commitment to civilian oversight. I thought based on the overwhelming support of the charter and what I thought was collaboration between the city, the union, and the community in the development of the charter. I have come to since learn there is no collaboration on any front in this city, nor do I believe there's a commitment to civilian oversight by the city manager, the city attorney, or the chief of police. I recognize the early frustration with the PAB and some of its members due to some of the comments that were made by some of the current and former board members. I will say one of my regrets is not calling it out when it happened. Chief, congrats on your appointment. However, I do not believe you're the right candidate for the job. I've worked with several chiefs over my career, and one of their biggest roles is communication with the community they serve. I don't get the feeling that you care about the community. The board has met in person a few times now, and not once have I seen you engage with community members at our meetings or members of this board. I do recognize this board can sometimes be a bit challenging, but this board is a reflection of the city of Berkeley, and not everyone is going to love what the police department does. I believe it is your role to work with not only this board, but other community groups to bridge the gap between law enforcement and citizens. I don't even know where I want to start with the city manager. How about I just say it concerns me that when the PAB and the chief disagree on a complaint finding, the city manager always sides with the chief. Not to say that the PAB gets it right all the time, but you would think that there would be some difference in the findings between the chief and the city manager, at least once. I also have concerns about the outside investigation being done on the text allegations. I don't trust the city manager to give much weight to those findings. If it's police department or chief, if there's findings against the police department staff or the chief. We have seen historically how the city manager has handled the results of unbiased outside investigation. Now, on to the city attorney. I have issues there as well. When the city attorney is basically reinterpreting the charter behind the scenes to take away the oversight authority from this body, it concerns me. Especially when the board is given direction by the city attorney not to share that this is the guidance being provided by her department. I believe if the city attorney believes the charter says something other than what is written, it is important that she appear before the public and interpret the charter for them. I do want to close my comments by saying there have been a few positive experiences for me on this board. I do believe there are some good people on the board that don't have an agenda other than wanting to see positive changes to law enforcement. I also want to acknowledge the staff. I believe they're doing a great job and the board is in good hands. I also want to recognize one former staff member, Byron Norris, who was a huge help to me when I joined this board. When I wasn't sure what my role was or how to approach this process, he said to me, read the charter and let it be your guide. As you probably can tell, I took that comment to heart and did just that. I've always strived to promote public trust through independent and objective civilian oversight. And finally, the police department members. I do believe there are good people in the department that are willing to work toward reasonable and fair oversight. It's just unfortunate those voices were not amplified more. I also want to address theories, reading books, going to seminars. I'm going to say this, no theory in the world will make any of us understand what it's like to get up in the morning, kiss our loved one goodbye, go to work, put on a bulletproof vest, put on a gun, and put on that uniform and not know if you're coming home at night safely to your family. And for all of you that think I'm pro-police, I also want to remind you that no theory in the world will let you know how it feels to be over-policed, as I have been multiple times in my life. No theory in the world will let you know the feeling of seeing an immediate family member's face bloody, bruised, and misshapen by a brutal beatdown put on by a gang of police officers. I also want to make it clear that that family member never had any interactions with the police either before or after this incident and was never charged with any crime. He was just a Black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. I have learned to approach law enforcement in the same way that I hope they approach me. I don't want to assume everyone that wears that uniform is bad, just like I don't want them to assume that every Black person is bad. Now, Chair, now that I've gotten all of that off my chest, I want to say I'm resigning from the board effective today.
No.
I'm pretty sure I don't have to provide any further explanation as to why. I wish everyone well and much success in the oversight process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Owens. I appreciate your comments and your passion. Would anybody else like to speak?
I'm very sorry to hear that. Totally understand what you're saying and share your frustrations, but I'm very sorry to see you leave.
Thank you.
I am too. I'm really, really sorry, and we'll miss you and your perspective and your passion. And I really respect your presentation.
Thank you.
And I assume you cannot be convinced otherwise
No, I cannot be.
to stay.
No, I cannot be.
Right.
I'm gonna stay to the end of the meeting though.
Please, please. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor over to the chief for the chief of police's report.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Begin.
Great. Okay. Good evening. I do want to start off by talking about some cases and some staffing, and then I do want to make some comments about where I hope our working relationship is now and where I hope we can get to. So as far as recent cases in our city, I wanted to share one from the 7th of this month. That was a 5 p.m. case, strong arm robbery with very serious injuries. In that case, a victim was at the corner of Sacramento and Derby when two suspects pushed her to the ground, hit, kicked, stomped the victim in the head and face, stole her bag, stole her cell phone. She lost both her ID and her credit card. As a result of that assault, victim's face suffered very serious injuries. She had to get transported for medical care. The two suspects that were sort of engaged in this act were described as females, 13 to 15 years old, with the driver of the getaway car described as a male in his 20s. You know, when I hear something like that, I immediately think of, you know, trafficking cases and some of those cases that we see where young individuals are convinced to enter into crime by some older person kind of orchestrating that. And obviously that's something that we take very seriously and want to both make sure we're protecting the community, but also examining when offenses like that occur, what else might be going on in that situation. The other case I wanted to talk about was a case that occurred on the 9th. That was at 2:20 in the morning. That was a armed commercial robbery and carjacking that happened at the cannabis dispensary in the 3000 block of Shattuck. In that particular case, there were six suspects, all armed with guns, who confronted the security guard out front, stole his vehicle and used it to ram into the temporary door, burglarized that location, and then fled in a vehicle. Some of our officers responding to that scene did see that the vehicle had crashed in the city of Emeryville and did try to apprehend a suspect, but weren't able to set the block in time. As far as staffing, I did want to identify some progress that we made, and that is we used to have to go outside the city to other locations to hold our physical agility tests for entry-level recruits. We have now set it up so that we can do those tests in the city of Berkeley, which means we don't have to wait for availability of a site to do testing. That's a really important step in us being able to stay ahead of other agencies who are pursuing the same candidates that we are. We're making some good progress towards our hiring. I was able to interview and make a conditional offer this week. I also know that there's an academy coming up this summer, and we're hoping for up to 6 individuals in that academy, and that's going to make a really big impact on our overall staffing. Just kind of in closing, I hear very clearly and appreciate the congratulations from the board, from the director, and I also hear very clearly the demand and need for us to be able to work better together. And I have said this, Director Lee and I talked about this, and Director Aguilar and I have talked about this. I feel like one of the hardest things that we are dealing with right now is the lack of permanent regulations. And I know we know how to make this work. We made this work with the PRC. We were able to have a functioning working relationship. We now have an expanded role and responsibilities and duties and expectations on an accountability board and a director. And we need to figure out what those rules and expectations are. And we need it to be clear for everyone involved. And then we need to dive into it and we need to get to work on it. And what I don't want to see is that we fracture our ability to work well together, trying to get to those permanent regulations. I fully support the importance of accountability in our community. And I do care what the community feels and says. And I do value the input and collaboration with the board. That's a place where I want us to be. I think we are there in a lot of ways. I see the good work that happens at the subcommittee level. I see when we worked through some of the surveillance policies, and they were really great feedback that we got and we were able to incorporate. I see that we can function in that space. And I know that how we are now navigating through discipline issues is just new for us. And we're working out timing issues, and we're working out what records goes where and when and all those issues. And we really do need very clear guidance and expectations. And I hope that we can get to permanent regulations and continue to keep building on our relationship. My commitment is to do that. My commitment is for all of those who you see at the subcommittees or representing the department as watch commanders in your meetings will carry that out. And I certainly want to know if they're not. And at any point, if you feel like we are not collaborating, then we need to figure out how to get to the place where we can collaborate. And I just, that's important to me. Us collaborating doesn't mean that we always agree. We're not going to always agree, but we need to hear each other and understand each other's positions so we can figure out what's best for our community. And I don't know how else to say that other than to say it and to show it in the actions that we have. And I'm looking forward to having that opportunity to show it. And that's all that I wanted to share tonight.
Thank you. Are you ready to take questions? Can I open the floor?
For sure.
Excellent. Board, is there any questions you'd like to address to the permanent chief? Please, Board Member Lethbridge.
Yes, good evening. I just have a few quick questions. In my neighborhood, we have a kind of an informal neighborhood watch, and there are a few cameras posted on some people's homes, and one member of our neighborhood closely monitors the footage and will send out emails to us saying, X number of, there are a lot of vehicle break-ins and thefts. And he sent an email out recently saying that the department will no longer allow him to provide footage, which I guess he used to do regularly, and he's actually helped solve some crimes. And I was just wondering why the change in the policy, does it have to do with it just too burdensome for you to get that footage? And what he was told is that you don't want it unless someone files a crime report. And so I just thought I would ask about that, how the department uses civilian footage of crimes.
Yeah, I guess the only thoughts I have without really having all the whole picture from the inside, and I certainly can ask, is that if he's sending large amounts of data files, we probably don't have the ability to store them if they're not connected to something. Obviously, we have to store and hold evidence, and we have evidence rules and how long we can hold it. We have rules around that. So typically the way it works is we ask people to register their cameras on our camera registry. Something occurs, or someone tells us that they believe something occurs, and then we go and seek out those who have those cameras and ask to see the footage of that incident, right? And then collect it as evidence. And so I don't think we really have a mechanism for just receiving daily loads of camera footage, but certainly if there's some crime he observes in that footage, I would expect that he would make a police report. We would take the police report and gather that. I'd be happy if you want to just connect me with that person and or facilitate a conversation. I'd be happy to kind of talk through that, just so we make sure we're talking about the same thing and understanding the same desires, because we certainly would not turn away evidence of a crime at any point in time.
Great, thank you. And then secondly, I just wanted to reiterate my request that you chief designate a liaison to the PAB. I had raised this, I think maybe initially 5 meetings ago, and you seemed receptive to the concept. And then I raised it every meeting since then. And certainly the idea is not to, keep you out of the loop. It's just to make our communications more efficient. And for example, if I wanted to follow up with this, relatively minor issue, if there was somebody else that I could ask, and you of course could be copied, whatever you want on all those emails, but I know you're extremely busy, and it just seems like it'd be more efficient if there was somebody who had kind of that official role with us.
Yeah, I absolutely understand why you're asking, and I think I'm hoping to move us to a space where it makes more sense to have that. The issue right now is that so much of the work that we do with the board and the director crosses amongst all of our divisions. And so for me to assign, the captain of, you often see Captain Durbin representing me when I can't make a meeting. But for me to assign him as the liaison, the challenge is that he then is often going to be tasking other captains out with work outside of his chain, or tasking someone outside of his chain of command. So the idea is I won't be the one that solves the riddle of what's going on with these surveillance cameras, but you tell me what the problem is. I then assign someone to it, and then I'm not part of it anymore. And so that it's not a perfect solution for a liaison, but it's a way for me to make sure the right captain is assigning the work, or the right division is getting the work. And I'm aware of what's happening in my department as far as work we're doing to support our relationship. I'm not, like I said, there may be space if we can configure, and as we go through our process to do our staffing assessment, we are asking them to look at how our organizational structure is set up. And there may be some space in there to identify a liaison that would make sense, that would be able to kind of to coordinate that. But for right now, I'm asking you to let's try this, what I'm proposing. If it continues to not work and you're still feeling like you're not getting routed to the right person or getting attached to somebody correctly, I'm happy to circle back on the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Calvino.
Thank you, Chief, for your report. I just had a kind of general question. You mentioned working with the PRC. And as you know, I was on that body before the PAB. And you mentioned working collaboratively with the PRC. And I'm wondering what, from your perspective, what you think changed. You mentioned that the PAB has expanded duties and responsibilities, but from the feeling that some members of the board have is that we've not been allowed to exercise our expanded duties and responsibilities. It feels to some of us that we have no more responsibilities and functions and authority than the PRC did, whereas the charter amendment was meant to expand those that authority. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, why is it that you were able, you say you work collaboratively with the PRC, but somehow we've gotten off on the wrong foot here? From your perspective, what happened?
I don't think anything. No,
it's fine. On the spot. I just, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't explain what I'm describing correctly. And so with the PRC, officers knew what to expect when they got a notice about something. They knew how to respond. They knew what the hearing was going to look like. They knew what their rights were before and after the hearing. We knew how our processes ran, and so everyone was clear. We had set rules around how we worked in subcommittees, and while we didn't agree, and there were a lot of things that we ended up having to turn to the council to help give us guidance on, we all understood what documents could and couldn't go, what timelines were and weren't in place. All the rules were understood. And now we are in a space where we have a charter that not everyone is in agreement over how to interpret. We I think have received some different and slightly varied guidance, and that's because I think we're asking slightly varied questions to the city attorney's office. So they're trying to answer a question I ask, and they give me an answer, and the director asks a question and they get an answer, and we think we understand what that means for us, but they don't always mesh because I think we've asked slightly different questions or from a different angle. And so for me, it's hard because I'm looking for us to understand, to make sure we're following the law, that we're not violating officers' rights, that we're following the charter. And even some of the timelines that are built in the charter around how many days we have to turn around, or I have to turn around a response to the director has to turn around a response to me, and then we send it to the city manager. We struggle with hitting those timelines because they were written maybe without real clear knowledge on how practically that timing can run when you're actually living through having a hearing, scheduling the hearing, getting results back, having to review the case and all those things. And so for me, once we get to permanent regulations, then we have agreed upon rules. And then everybody knows what you have to turn over when, where you need to be when, how you get subpoenaed and how you respond and all those pieces. And then everybody's clear. And then we can hold people to the rules that have been set. And so what I find challenging right now is we have existing practices from the PRC that people understood as standard practices. And then we have things that are clearly written in the charter that lay things out that we all kind of agree on. And then we have some stuff in the charter that there's disagreement on. And so, and then we also have temporary regulations. So we have all these things at play, and we are navigating for the first time ever, what it looks like when a case goes to the city manager for appeal. And what does it look like when a community member asks for an appeal post findings of discipline being made, and all those processes. And So we are in this really important space, I feel, both the PAB board, the Office of Director of Police Accountability, and the police department, in setting the foundation that's going to be the foundation for decades to come about how we do our accountability in our city. And so what I meant by it was functioning under the PRC, was like, because we knew what those rules were, and now we're trying to figure out and exist in the space that we're in now.
So from your perspective, it's growing pains, and that once we have the permanent regulations and the growing pains have subsided, we will in fact have expanded duties and responsibilities relative to the PRC.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think that's
right.
clear in the charter.
Okay, I'd like to ask a few questions and kind of pivot a little bit. And it goes to the cannabis dispensary robbery that just happened. I was told that the officers came upon the scene while the robbery was taking place. Is that true?
I'm not familiar with that piece of it. Lieutenant Montgomery might be more familiar with that specifics of the case.
Yeah, when officers arrived on scene, the 3 different cars of robbers fled in several different directions in their vehicles.
I was told that the officers did not engage. Is that fair and accurate?
No, that wouldn't be my understanding. I know.
Okay.
They fled in several different directions because of the nature of the crime. There was a short pursuit, there was a collision, a block search in several different places. They were looking for suspects. Unfortunately, weren't able to obtain an arrest.
Okay. Were you on scene for that?
No, I went.
I just heard from somebody who was on scene for that, so I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Lieutenant Montgomery. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask?
I got a question.
Sure.
So Chief, I have a question. You made mention of the fact that you will be stepping up to the plate, working with the community, working with this body more. Did I get that right?
You did?
So my question is, why hasn't that happened before? You've been in the role of interim chief for, it's been well over 18 months, 2 years. Why hadn't it happened before? What's changed that now you're gonna step up to the plate?
I'm not sure why you feel that hasn't happened. I'm sorry that you feel it hasn't happened, but I have been engaged with the director. I've been engaged with the chair. I've met with board members. We've participated in subcommittee processes. We've brought you policies more so than is anticipated by the charter, because we've tried to expand that working relationship. When I knew there was a 30-day notice for turnaround from the PAB, instead of just handing you a policy and saying you only have this much time.
I was like, are you our IT guy? As well as everything.
Might be on her end.
Yeah, I think Chief, I'm not sure if you could hear us, but you're frozen on our ends. And there's no sound going through.
I guess it's a curve.
Oh,
In a perfect world.
Is she there?
yes.
Thank you, Jose.
Yeah. And sorry about that, folks. We had a bit of a technical difficulty with our Wi-Fi, but we're back in action, so. Okay.
So is there anything else we want to address with the chief, or should we move on? We don't.
Is she there?
I thought, since she was there.
There we go. Yes.
Okay. Did you want to finish up what you were saying, Chief? We apologize for the technical difficulties.
No, that's fine. Sorry. I'm dealing with my family difficulties here too with my kids, so it's okay. It gave me a nice 5-minute break. No, I was just trying to express to board member Owens that I think there's a lot of ways that we are working well, and I am working with the board. It may not be immediately apparent to everyone on the board, but I think we have a stronger relationship around trying to get things into collaborative space earlier. Both Captain and Durbin and I know I've talked to you about trying to get you policies early and work through them and identify where we need to address things, give you heads up that things are coming. so that you have time to get through agendize items, seat your subcommittee and do that. In some cases, ordinances only give you 30 days to turn something around. And these are important documents. We try to broadcast it's coming and try to work through that as much as we can with the other timeline based, because we're trying to hear from the board who's providing community viewpoint and oversight into the work that we're doing. And so, I'm sorry that it feels like it may not feel like we've made progress. All I can say is we're going to keep moving towards it.
Thank you, Chief.
No, one more comment.
Please.
I'm sorry, I'm just
Go
like,
ahead. This is your time.
No, you know what, I do want to make one comment. I want to recognize Lieutenant Montgomery down here, because he worked with us on the subcommittee for the regulations, and his input and insight was, I would say, especially helpful for me.
Yeah.
So I want to commend him, and I do want to once again acknowledge that your staff members have been very helpful and very insightful when I have participated in subcommittees. So I don't, like I said, I don't have issues with relationships with the police department staff. So thanks.
Great. And just so you know, I always try to get in the room with you guys, our experts, our departmental experts on these topics, because they're the ones that are going to help guide me on what good policy, what good procedure is. And so when we know you see the subcommittee, we ask ourselves, I ask myself, who's the best people to get in the room with you guys and hear out and be able to talk about what our views are, hear yours, and come to good collaboration. I mean, and again, I'll call on the PRC. That some of that work works really well under the PRC, and I think has worked really well with some of our subcommittees. And I think that can continue. And when they're in the room, they are speaking on my behalf. They are there on my authority. We brief on what my overall intent is around those things, and they're there representing me. And I unfortunately can't be at every meeting. I can't be at every subcommittee meeting. That doesn't mean that my voice and my input and my collaboration is not part of that process.
Thank you, Chief. And at that point, I'm going to go ahead and close up this conversation. And we're going to move to agenda item subcommittee reports number 6. So policy and practices relating to the downtown task force and biking and allegations. Chair Owens.
So I wanted to report that the outside investigator is aware of the 240-day deadline to complete their investigation. That deadline would be sometime early, the first week of July. The last we heard, he's on track to complete his investigation sometime in June. So that portion of the investigation, there should be a report that is issued. Because it is a personnel related report, it probably won't be a public report, but there should be something in front of probably the city manager at that time. When it comes to the PAB, I just want to make it really clear that the PAB's work on this particular item is related to policy review only, policy and practices. So the PAB will be continuing their work past that time period. And a lot of that work will be dependent on what some of the findings are in the with the allegations. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Very insightful. And Chair Harris isn't here for body worn cameras. Do I have anyone else on that subcommittee that can step in and give a quick update?
I can.
Please.
Yeah, so we met on May 4th, and Lieutenant Ledoux and Captain O'Keefe were there and provided invaluable insight about and responses to our questions, particularly around how some of these policies work day to day, because you can read something and if you don't have the experience, you don't really understand how they apply in the real world. So that was super helpful. Our next meeting is on May 18th.
Excellent. And then Chair Left, why don't we just go ahead to conflict of interest and keep that ball rolling?
Sure. So we're waiting for a response from the city attorney's office to the letter that the board sent out after our last meeting, requesting written and non-written protocols from the city attorney's office around detecting and resolving conflict of interest. So their response was that they needed additional time to respond. So I'm hoping that PCA Chang can give us an estimate about when we can expect to receive a response to that letter.
You're on mute, DCA Chang.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Better? All right, great. So I did just want to clarify that we did provide the response that board member Left, which noted that at this time, no responsive documents have been located because the request was for both documents and information. No responsive documents have been located, but we are preparing a memo regarding conflict of interest issues that addresses both the letter that was sent recently, as well as a previous request that was sent through the director, I believe, on March 29th or in late March or so. So we are working on those memos, and we are prioritizing that assignment, and we'll try to get those to you, as soon as we're able to, hopefully within the next few weeks. Although, we have, as you know, and I think you met at the last meeting, we have a new attorney in our office who's also supporting us. So he's been able to help increase the attention that our office is able to give to PAB, and he's working together with both Iris and I, as well as the city attorney Farima, on that memo. And that is a priority assignment for us. So we hope to get back to you on that soon.
Can I jump in here real quick, DCHA? If I want to be clear, are you saying there was no kind of balancing test, or there was no identifiable metric for conflict of interest before this memo? It was whoever decided, there was no balancing test?
So the request was for documents that
That's all you
reflect any protocols. As attorneys, we comply with the rules of professional conduct regarding ethics, and we are constantly analyzing those issues internally and discussing them, as well as referring to ethical authorities. So, the fact that there is not a document or a written protocol about conflicts does not mean that we pay no attention to conflicts issues, or that we are not analyzing.
That's not what I'm
issues on a
saying.
regular
I just
basis.
wanted to know how we get to the decisions we're getting to when we're talking about conflict of interest. That's it.
Right, and so I think our memo will speak to that in more directly, and so I defer the discussion until we provide you that written analysis.
If you're talking about one memo, our hope was to bifurcate those issues and to make this a very clean, simple request, just about how the office, and the letter said written and non-written, there's nothing in writing. So our hope was
Right,
that
so
you would
since there's
respond to
nothing in
that
writing,
and-
we'll have to reduce that to writing for you, and that's what we're doing with the memo.
No, I understand that, but my point was that we were hoping to have you just hone in on that particular issue about how conflicts of interest are detected and resolved, aside from the other bigger issues about, our potential conflicts of interest. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I thought I heard you say that you're going to be providing a memo that addresses all of these issues, but there were two separate requests. One that Director Aguilar sent out with our chair, and one that came from the board that was much more narrow.
Right, and the approach that we're taking is to provide you with a comprehensive response, addressing all of the conflicts issues together. Our view is that the request to provide kind of in the abstract a description of how conflicts are handled in general is not, is not really tenable, given that any conflict analysis is necessarily fact specific. It depends on the fact pattern and what potential issues are in play and who the potential adverse parties are to determine whether there's a conflict. And so, what I've said is that as a general matter, we are educated about and comply with the rules of professional conduct regarding ethics. But in order to provide you description of that process as it pertains to the board, we need to contextualize it in the overall conflict of interest analysis as it pertains to the board and its functions and our role with respect to the board.
Okay, I would just say it's kind of surprising to me that you wouldn't have general rules, since this must come up frequently, but I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so that takes us out of these subcommittee.
Board Member Levin.
Oh, I'm sorry, board member, of course.
Deputy Chang, what I'm wondering is if it might be easier to identify what we're asking for in terms of determination of conflict, if you can narrow it to giving advice to different bodies within the same city. So that you're advising us on the one hand, you may have heard earlier in the conversation with the chief, she's essentially asking the same question inferentially. She's saying she's been given advice by your office, and we, or the office, our office, the Office of Police Accountability, has also been advised by your office. At times, it appears there's a conflict between these two bodies. And we're the oversight body. The police department is the law enforcement body that is actually employed by the city. This is a civilian oversight body. How do you determine when you are giving advice to these two disparate bodies within the city that you can actually do that without producing a conflict or creating a conflict?
So thank you, Board Member Levine. I understand the inquiry. We will be addressing that in the memo. What I want to say here, though, is that our role advising our internal entities within the city, which is our client, the city itself, is to be objective and to provide advice. We are not in an advocacy role for any department. So it is not the case that when the police department comes to us, we are trying to fashion a result for them, or that when the board comes to us, we're trying to fashion a result for you. We see our role as being to provide objective advice, and those chips may fall where they fall. And we are trying to be as transparent as possible in terms of. I see your hand raised, and I will give you the moment. Get to you in just a moment. I just want to finish what I'm saying here, which is that we are trying to be transparent in the advice that we're providing, and to ensure that the advice that we share with the police department is the same advice that we share with you. And that's why in the most recent memo on charter interpretation issues, it was addressed and sent simultaneously to the police department and to the board. We want to be very clear that we're not fashioning our advice or providing different advice based on who's asking it, but we're trying to give the same objective advice to all of the internal entities within the city. And so I think when the chief was referring to past instances in which the department was asking for advice, the board was asking for advice, and there were different interpretations of what was being said, we recognize that there was a perception that occurred. And so since then, we've been trying to be more transparent in terms of just delivering the same advice simultaneously to the board and to the department, so that there's no misunderstanding and there's no discrepancy in terms of interpretation of what may have been said to one internal entity versus the other internal entity.
But do you see the problem here? Because essentially what you're doing is you're acting as a judicial body you're dictating, this is what the charter says. And you guys have to follow this interpretation. It may be that our role gives rise to a different interpretation than the department's interpretation. So how can you advise both of us? Aren't you essentially dictating on behalf of the city what the city's interpretation is of that question?
This is a common scenario for municipal lawyers who have to advise the entire entity, whether it be city attorneys or county council. Legally, the city of Berkeley is the municipal corporation, and it is our single client. We have also, setting aside the PAB and the police department, there are numerous other situations in which two different departments of the city may have different views on a particular matter, and they come to the city attorney's office for advice. In that situation, as with the board and the police department, we see our role is to provide objective advice, not advocating for a particular result, and not advocating for one particular department versus another department. But our role is to provide legal interpretation of municipal authorities, and that is a very common situation that city attorneys are placed in. And in drafting the memo, we will be explaining more of this analysis in the municipal law context, because it is not an unusual fact pattern, and there are ethical authorities addressing this, and we'll be explaining
But
that.
are you saying that, okay,
Board Member Holmes.
go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. You made a comment about the city attorney department is providing advice to the police department and this body, correct?
Yes.
So by your own, by saying that you're providing advice, we as a board can choose not to follow your advice because it is just that, advice, correct? Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's advice, correct?
So I mean, our role as the attorney for the city is to provide interpretation of the law and to advise all of the internal entities of the city that they should be following the law.
And as you said, as attorney for the city, right? So your role is risk management for the city of Berkeley, correct? So this board is going in a direction that potentially could provide some risk to the city. Your role is to make sure the city, because that is your client, is protected. So therefore, your advice is going to be that to protect the city, which means your advice may not necessarily agree with what this board thinks is the proper thing to do, because you're going to protect the city. That's your role. Am I not correct?
So we represent the city as an entity, and the board is part of the city, as the police department is part of the city.
Okay.
We are all part of the same entity.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Just so I'm clear, are you saying that there are no facts under which the city attorney's office would have a conflict of interest when representing different agencies?
I'm not saying that. And again, we are analyzing this issue in detail in the forthcoming memorandum that you've requested. I want to be clear. I'm not saying here that there is never any situation in which there would be a conflict, but the circumstances under which such a conflict could arise are going to be dictated by particular facts, and so we'll be analyzing that in the memo.
Okay, thank you, DCHA. I really appreciate your time and energy and effort.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, please, direct.
Before we follow up, the city attorney's office did give me that email. They gave it to me yesterday, so I'm gonna forward it to you, but I'll try to, before you called on DCHA, I was like, wait, they've sent it to us, but he just gave me the information, but I'll send the email proper tomorrow.
Thank you, Director. So that's gonna take us to number 9 on the agenda, which is old business, and it's our training seminar.
Chair, if I may, given the technical difficulties we're experiencing, I'm not sure if
I
we
think
should
that's
get.
quite all right this evening.
Okay.
I don't see any objections to that, do I? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and skip our business and agenda number 9, which is our training, and move to agenda 10, new business. Appointment of members to the Berkeley Center Charter Section 125 Review Subcommittee.
You only got 4 people.
Who's not on it is a better question now. One of us is.
What is, I don't understand what that sub,
So
I
that's a-
missed last meeting, so
Not a
maybe.
problem, let me fill you in very
I
quickly.
volunteered you for it at our last meeting.
You did? What is it? What am I on?
We're gonna be reviewing the charter and looking for places in the charter that need to be refined, reframed.
Okay.
Cleared up. We wanna make sure that everyone's on the same page. And there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of ambiguity within the writing. And we wanna go ahead and see, you know, can we talk about it? Can we clarify? Do we have to take this to the people? Do we have to prepare another amendment? Where does this go? So we're looking at that from a very top-down level, and hopefully we'll dial it in to figure out as a subcommittee what we need to do to make the charter more reasonable and work for us instead of working against us.
So that committee was meant to be internal, figuring out how to make it work for us, because I was going to propose, actually, given that there's this item on the agenda, I think we need a closed session in which we invite the city attorney and the co-authors of the charter amendment to come and do a closed session with us, in which the city attorney, and maybe this follows some subcommittee meeting in which we say, okay, this provision needs to be interpreted this one. There's about, I don't know, let's say 4. I mean, it's not the entire document.
That's kind of what this subcommittee will do, would find those things. We'd like to bring all the stakeholders to the table, so we invite the police department, the PBA, and have everybody, so we're all on the same page about what exactly is being said, written, and agreed to within the.
But it seems to me, having all the stakeholders may confuse things a bit, because what I would like to see is, what is the city attorney's interpretation of this provision? And next to that, the co-author's intent in writing that provision. And, you know, I don't think we need to have all the stakeholders, because that would just be hashing out what people want it to be, but I
was gonna say, can we discuss it in the subcommittee that I'm gonna
Sure.
ask you to serve on right now?
It was, yeah.
And board member Lethbridge, I think you're,
Well,
I mean,
now,
my vice chair is also.
We may not have any board members left.
I mean, that's.
You know,
I'm already on the body worn camera policy, the conflict of interest. And I'm very concerned how behind we are on the lexical policies. We haven't had one meeting, and we were deferring that until
Right.
the regulation subcommittee. So we finally got done with that, and it took us forever. And then we were gonna resume lexical, and we haven't done that. And so I'm very concerned about this.
Yeah.
I think this is a good idea, but I'm just wondering if we should defer it. I don't know. And
I'm
again,
not-
we're down on
Yeah,
members.
we're down on members, and I'm not sure we need a subcommittee, you know.
Okay.
I mean, I could volunteer to write out a list of, I mean, if something came up last night at the council meeting, that it needs to be hashed out what it means by consultation, you know, the city manager consults with the PAB on hiring of the chief and so forth. So, you know, there's a handful of things, and as we continue, other things may emerge that we don't recognize yet, but we know several things that we need to have. I think a limited number of people in the room, the people who are interpreting this, and the authors of this document.
I guess I have a different view of it, and I thought the subcommittee was for us to highlight areas that we thought needed clarifications. That would be one. What does consult mean?
Right.
And clarify it and in new language. Because I don't think we're gonna get anywhere if you ask the city attorney, what does this mean? And they're certainly not gonna do it on the spot. And I don't think they would give us a closed session because we've asked for closed sessions before and they're very narrow
Yes,
circuit.
but this would be about labor relations. There's an
Okay, well,
exception
it's
for
often
labor.
been about that, but anyway,
Yeah.
I don't, and when you talk about the drafters, I mean, there were so many drafters, there was union input, there were people on the city council who now aren't even on the city council.
Yeah,
So that's not how you really determine legislative intent anyway, so, I don't think that.
I'm just especially concerned, without giving away confidentiality, I'm really especially concerned by the latest interpretation of what kinds of investigations we can do. It seems to me that it so limits us, and in my opinion, in my, humble opinion, the charter amendment says one thing, and I would like to really, I mean, we all have the confidential memo from the city attorney's office, which lays this out. But I think we need to have a face-to-face conversation about this. I want to push back on that. And I don't know when and how, but I think we need to push back on that interpretation, which is contrary to the face of the document.
But I agree with you, but I think that's slightly different than what we were talking about. This subcommittee was more perspective down the road. If there's a new charter amendment that the voters vote on, what language would we like to see it? Where do we think the ambiguities are?
Oh, I see.
So
You
it's a
mean trying to
slightly-
fix the chart? Okay,
Yes.
all right, I get it.
So it's a slightly different,
I get it. That's a different subject.
but I agree that
Okay,
with what you're
we need to do
talking about.
both. We have two subcommittees.
Board Member Owens.
So I honestly want to point out that you're down to 4 board members. So 2 board members is a quorum. So I don't think you can form a subcommittee. I'm just throwing that out
No,
there,
no, it's
at
good.
least not at this point.
Maybe we should move this to our agendas for our next meeting.
You're gonna have to.
Yeah, hopefully.
We're gonna have
Back to
So I'm not so losing.
some new people.
We have to get them up to speed. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Fun.
So that's gonna take me to 10B.
Oh, so I'm sorry, what did we decide?
We're gonna move that to next week.
We just
For
got.
next week.
With a new.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, when the new people come on?
yeah.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you not like that idea?
Well, it's just that the new people won't have the context for that
Oh, I know. It's
conversation.
it's not gonna be fun. That's what I was just saying. Director.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you have, and I don't know the procedures off the top of my head, but can you reassign members to subcommittees? Because it may not be appropriate for new members to engage in this particular one, but maybe
Right.
we could, right?
That's a good idea. And I don't know if there is a subcommittee protocol for adding
Probably
numbers. Does anyone know?
probably in the standing room somewhere.
It's within the standing rules and procedures, actually, quite similar.
Okay.
As the chair, you can appoint members to certain.
Love it.
But it has to be on the agenda.
Yes. Right.
So we could agendize, and it might be a good time to just go through all of our subcommittees. And kind of see, because there are several subcommittees that are still active. That have lost members or currently have no members, or down to 1 member. So it's a good idea, if that's the way that the board wants to go and do that restructuring. And later on in the agenda, we'll be talking about some guidelines related to subcommittees. So
Excellent. Well, let's streamline that process. That makes sense to me. Is everybody okay with that?
Sure.
I'll just get the motion.
Can we just indefinitely defer this though, or you're saying next?
Well, I think if we're gonna take a look at all these subcommittees and we're gonna reassign and reassess, let's just get it all done at once and see where we're at. If we don't have enough members or enough bandwidth, we'll just pull back on the subcommittee, but I'd like to have a discussion. Just one fell swoop. But I'm hoping. That's what I'd like to do. It's not what I have to do.
You want to do that in the June meeting as opposed to?
Yeah,
That
would
would,
that work?
Sure.
I just get the formal motion.
I guess, does somebody else want to make, I hate when I make the motion.
I'll make a motion that you propose it, postpone it until your June meeting.
A second.
Right. Unanimous consent?
Doesn't take much to be unanimous anymore.
No. It's just assuming that. That's what I'm like, okay, next. So now, new business discussion regarding the proposed governance for PAB subcommittees. It's right on time.
So, no, we're doing a procedure for internal, external communication.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're on B.
we're on me. Yeah. I'm fast forwarding here, guys. I'm sorry. Consideration of ODPA's proposed procedure for internal, external communications between the board and other parties.
If I may, Chair. So on page 43, I wrote a memo just pursuant to our last discussion. This is the conversation started. I don't anticipate you taking any action here today. And it doesn't have to be as elaborate as this. But I just provided some resources that I have used elsewhere. The management centers, nonprofit that helps streamline social justice related organizations and empower them to be able to do the work. This is one particular communications protocol that starts on page 45 after the memo that we utilized, adopted in Charlottesville in page 48. It shows you what our interpretation of it was. So over there, we had advisory panels, committees, board members and chairs, executive director. So the way it's reading is everything from the right is going to the left in terms of communication. So the advisory panels report to committees, and the committees to the board members and chair, and the executive director. The reason we did that, it's different dynamics and different city landscape and different politics. And that was a model that sort of works for us in terms of external communications and internal communications. It's not something that we have to adapt here, but it's more so to give you some sort of framework. And again, it doesn't have to be as elaborate as this, but I know that we want to try to codify some sort of communication protocol so I don't get in the way, the office doesn't get in the way, and you can have free range to speak to the other stakeholders without us tripping on each other or holding the communications back.
That's great. Board Member Lethbridge.
So thanks for coming up with raising this issue, because we definitely need some clarity around it. I personally found this kind of confusing. But my hope is just that whatever protocols we come up with will make it so the communications are efficient. And I'm thinking in the context of the subcommittee, say I'm in a subcommittee and Lieutenant Montgomery's on it, and we're talking about scheduling the meeting, the next meeting, or things that are, day-to-day communications. Maybe I have just a quick question about a policy that I can just email him, and it doesn't have to go through you, or it doesn't have to go through the chair. Obviously, things that are very significant communications, shouldn't be done that way. But so whatever protocols we come up with, I just hope that they're done with an eye towards efficiency.
And I agree with you. I think it's important too, because sometimes there might be like minor details to give you some real case studies. Sometimes in other places I've been, a board member would email directly a staff member without my knowledge, and there was expectation that a room would be set up, but I didn't know anything about it, so the room wasn't set up. So things like that, we just gotta have, so we're all on the same page for situational awareness. But I agree with you, yeah, I think it's important.
Or maybe it could just be you always CC,
Right.
just so that you're in the loop,
Yeah.
CC, or the chair is CC. But like, for example, tonight, when I was asking the chief about the issue that came up in my neighborhood watch situation, and she was saying, I can reach out to her, but she seemed so busy, and then Lieutenant Montgomery said I could reach out to him, so. And I guess that's another issue, but I just hate to have her involved in stuff that, to me, that's a pretty minor question.
I agree with you.
And that's not a subcommittee, it's just something that arose, in my.
And I agree. I think what happens though, and maybe I was misreading or overreading it might trigger certain things. Did you send the now official communication as a board member to the police? Did that trigger this timeline? Did they give you a response? So I think maybe she was trying to be on top of these things, so if for whatever reason it takes longer to get your response back, that there's some accountability there. I don't know, maybe I was reading too far into that.
You got it.
But yeah, but either which way, I think whatever we do, it'd be great to present it to her, so she could understand what we're good, how we're gonna be operating and what the expectations are, so.
Director, so this chart, this is how things were done in Charlottesville, or?
Yeah, I mean, that was a proposal that we were utilizing, some sort of soft protocols that we were, there were sometimes it's just different, there was miscommunication because sometimes board members were directly contacting staff and then it.
I understand.
And sometimes also there wasn't awareness from the staff's perspective of like what their responsibilities were. So they were like,
Yeah,
well, they emailed us, what do we do? So it came back to me anyway.
I just wouldn't like any confusion that this is what's happening here.
No.
Yeah.
And I apologize if I didn't make that clear. That was more so just resources to give you
Yeah.
some sort of framework of what we can do.
So are we ready to move on to C?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So this item is also very, again, with a similar intent as the item we just discussed. They're not necessarily things that we're expecting y'all to vote on today, but it's more of establishing what preparing and managing some of our subcommittees could look like moving forward. It doesn't include everything that might come up, but it's just, again, a conversation starter. There's some administrative things that we behind the scenes of the office have to do. And that oftentimes do get a little bit complicated in the current way that we're kind of going about certain things. And just again, going back to providing a platform where our office could step back in some of these subcommittees so that y'all don't necessarily have to depend on us to get certain meetings scheduled. So again, this is something that I drafted quickly, just with some of the things that I have noticed and some of the areas that I think that we can work on. Kind of like as a collaborative. Again, these are open to feedback. Again, you know, I've been in this position for what, 7 months, so I'm not sure if there's a practice that worked really well with the PRC or even before I arrived. So again, this document's open to feedback, and I welcome that if y'all have it now or y'all want to reach out later. Yeah.
Well, I agree that some guidelines are important and having served on many subcommittees, both the PRC and the PAB like others. I know how much work is involved in being on these subcommittees. When I look at this, what jumps out at me is some tasks that seem really burdensome, like creating a work. This is the first meeting, creating a work plan and taking minutes. I mean, I'm an avid note taker, so I take a lot of notes, but they're for my own use. And the idea of having to type something up for somebody else and come up with a formal work plan at the first meeting just seems excessive to me.
Right, and you know, again, doesn't necessarily have to be within the first meeting. I do believe that creating a work plan is something that should be a part of every subcommittee at some point. I'll just take it back to the example of the subcommittee we're discussing as part of item 10A, where a subcommittee like that would definitely be important to have a work plan to identify the goals that are going to be approached, the different aspects that we're going to be looking into, and making those decisions about, you know, this sort of goes back to the minutes comment about should we be recording, like, do we want to record this meeting? How do we want to record that? Do we just want to do video? Do we want to do closed captioning? Do we want to have a physical summary of the minutes? And that's kind of where that approach is, just to make sure we have a record. And that's just where I wanted that note, but I do agree, you know, that's not something that every subcommittee would have to follow. For example, some subcommittees where they're just more task oriented towards reviewing something that may not be necessary, but like long-term projects or that are gonna require more work by different people, it's better to stay organized in my opinion. So that's kind of where this approach was taken. And of course, to help Maritza, who is very helpful in terms of making sure everybody gets their stipends and making sure we have the right data. So this was also a consideration in some of her as well. But again, it's a bigger conversation.
Why don't we,
Carry on to the subcommittee next week. Or,
Exactly.
sorry, not next week, but that discussion at the next week. Any questions?
All right. So that's gonna take us to 11, which is public comments.
I would like to say something.
Wow.
I wanted to go on that, I can remember. Sorry, thanks for bearing with me with all my photos. I just want to get photos of everybody for when I do stories, I have them in the future. So thank you for your accommodation. What was I gonna say? So I'm sorry, I'm getting over like my fourth cold of 2023.
Oh, no.
It's really busy. I was gonna say with I like the size of a room. It's nice given the group. I do hope if we're gonna keep meeting here, maybe they could boost the Wi-Fi in some way. If I want to live tweet or, people want to stream newsworthy comments, then it would be great because I haven't been able to reliably connect here or at the other building. Because it seems kind of the signal is weak here. On the subject, sorry, this is just me opining. There's no timer, but I was gonna say about this whole process around the conflict of interest in the city attorney's office. Just speaking as a member of the public with an interest in transparency, which I know many of you also share. It's been so frustrating because, at times it's been said, oh, this memo will be available, and then it was not gonna be available, and comments that the board members have made about, we'd like to share more about the guidance we're getting and why we can't say this or say that. And I just, fully on board with all of that. I just think there's so much interest in how this process is developing, what will happen, and I understand some things do need to be confidential and, concerns about litigation or whatever the concerns may be. But it would be great if there was more visibility into the rationale around some of these things and, what can the board do investigations or not and all of that. And I feel like all of the public, including the board, sort of is on the same page, and then there's another perspective that has a more conservative interpretation of things. But anyway, also I was just gonna say, as you guys all know, I run the Berkeley Scanner, and on Sunday I was the first to report about the horrible robbery with the woman who was attacked by the two girls. The dispensary robbery, I was up in the middle of the night out at the scene for hours. So I hope everyone is reading it. It's all, free to everyone. There's no fee. So when I write about policy, I write about breaking news, I write about all kinds of things. So hopefully as you are monitoring public safety in the city, it's one of the resources. And I do, if I have something that specifically relates, I send it to the director and he very kindly forwards it on. And I've had great experiences with staff responsiveness, board responsiveness. I'm very sorry that we are losing members, excited about new ones, but there's a lot of knowledge that will be walking out of the room tonight. And that's sad to see because it has been a challenge to just get things on all cylinders, as you guys have noted. So I guess all we can look at is the silver lining of got new people coming, and now, we'll see where things go. So thank you all.
Thank you.
With that, we will go to our virtual speakers.
That's all I can. Long time.
Are there any members currently tuned in who would like to give public comment? Okay. Kit Saginor, you have been given permission to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm really sad to see that this is the last meeting for two board members who have been particularly helpful and particularly productive in many ways. Both board member Levine, which I knew was coming because of the situation of her appointment, and the surprise, of course, is that board member Owens is stepping down. Board member Owens has been a particularly straight shooter of calling things like they are. I really, really appreciate her remarks this evening, which were direct and to the point and forthright and really forthright about things that many of us are kind of too polite to say directly much of the time. And of course, it's a huge loss that is the kind of voice that we really need in the city. I hope that not being on the PAB will not mean, and I'm not sorry, I'm not there to see her as I speak, Cheryl Owens, I really hope that you will still stay engaged with the process of bringing more justice to the city of Berkeley. This is really hard that you're leaving the PAB, but completely understandable. I don't really. I thought there was something more I could add, but really at this point, I'm just so. I know that we need your voice, and hope that we will continue to have your thoughts and your voice and your thinking and your good work in some form, and that's true also for board member Levine. Thank you. I'm sorry, there is one more thing. I still have a minute. And that was just sort of a note, and I'm sorry that the chief has left the meeting. I noted that the chief didn't at first really respond to what had been said directly, and didn't seem to want to sort of be present enough to really hear what was being said here in the room. She did at some point address it, and I noted that she said, "I'm sorry that you feel. I'm sorry that it seems." I just want, as a rule of thumb, I think it is really good for people to understand that if you are using the words "I'm sorry," what has to come after that is "I'm sorry I did something." You really, if you're saying you're sorry for what somebody else thinks, you're not apologizing. You're not, sorry is not the right word for that. I just like to improve awareness of what those words mean. Okay, thank you so much.
And Rivka, you have been granted permission to speak. The timer is starting now.
Okay, well, Kit Saginor said a lot of what I wanted to say too. It took courage for Cheryl Owens to make her statement, and I appreciated that it was blunt and straightforward and a truth that needs to be heard. And I too was disappointed that the chief didn't respond once the statement was made. She just went into other stuff, and that says something about her relating to feelings in the community, and especially when it's about issues to do with race, and her not deigning to respond is very disturbing. So I appreciate also Deborah Levine, who I very much liked working with as a public member of a subcommittee in the past. And I just hope you can get some good new members and keep on keeping on. And I'll stop with that.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, with that said, are there any additional members of the public attending virtually who would like to speak? This is the last call. Oh, there you go. Okay, Andrea, you have been granted permission to speak. The timer has started.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm joining the meeting late and so I missed the remarks from the commissioners who resigned. But and I certainly understand and appreciate their position. My gosh. It was a devastating blow last night. And it's sort of disorienting to think what the path forward is from here. But I do want to say this, that Berkeley Cop Watch and the Human Rights Data Analysis Group have been doing Public Records Act requests. We've been gathering information. We've been talking to the district attorney, and I will advocate for us to work with the PAB if to help you all do a really thorough investigation, because there's some really rotten stuff going on in the city and in this department. And it feels like the worse it gets, the more they get paid and the more insular they become. And the inefficiencies in the department are vast. And throwing millions of dollars at public safety to and having no desire to really truly evaluate the effectiveness of this department is sort of stunning at this point. And it's glaring. My understanding is that, our department pays very well relative to other departments in the state of California. I think did I read that it was 92% in the 92nd percentile? We've given them quite a bit. And so it's time that we evaluate them vigorously. I also believe that this issue of the conflict of interest with the city attorney has to become a high priority for our community and for the PAB, that we have to be able to sue. We have to be able to fight in court for some measure of justice. And that coddling, officers who are clearly perpetrators of racist policing practices has to be dealt with. And the PAB has to have that power. And I didn't realize, I last night was really quite a wake-up call. And so we want to unite with you and work, so long as you're fighting this fight, we're here with you. So thank you for your work, and stay strong.
Yeah. We do have one more hand. And Najim, you have been granted permission to speak. The timer will start now. Najim? Najim, are you there? If you're speaking, you're currently muted.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I was talking and I was muted. Okay, well, sorry about that. I didn't understand the way your system works. I just want to say that it's not surprising. It's been going on. We voted Jesse and a bunch of new progressives in 2016, hoping for a new day and a huge change and shift in our city government. And we've seen all along the backwalking, the backpedaling, and all the deals that are being struck. We lost one of our most progressive city council members to and just plans. They kind of set her up and her voice was silenced. And who replaced her, I'm sorry to say, is like not all kinfolk or skinfolk turned out to be a backstabber to brown and black people, especially last night. We saw him working. And I also myself ran for city government and saw how it works. There are back deals, there's things that happen, and it's totally out of the control of popular elections. It's how the Democratic big system works. The Alameda County Dems and how they co-opt people, they co-opt movements, and they disarm them and make them just much weaker. It's a whole systemic thing. The PAB is part of that. It doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't have any way of enforcement, and it's made powerless by these people. And unless we realize that it's a whole systemic thing and that we have to make a big shift, I think we're always going to be blindsided and be like, well, I thought they were going to do this, but they're not. And until we realize change comes from the outside at times, not from the inside, and we have to really organize, and that means a huge shift and change so that we can give the PAB voice. Without that grassroots organizing and kind of coming together of different coalitions, it's impossible to give voice and power to the PAB. Thank you.
I'm missing.
Okay. I currently do not see any additional hands, Chair.
All right, that takes us to, before we go into public comment, I want to let the room know that I am deeply saddened by the news of Board Member Owens leaving. As I'm going on a little repeat here, but it's just as true, it's just as real. You've been a pillar of this board since its inception. You have been a voice of honesty, of unbiased, I'd say perception, and giving everyone, you know, in the room the chance to be heard. And it's been very powerful. I've seen you change minds and hearts, and I've seen your mind and heart be changed. At the same time, I have not accepted your resignation, so we're gonna kind of tell. As you can tell, I don't have a lot of quit in me, and I don't think you do either, but that's okay, we can talk about that.
We can talk.
And I just want to make those comments and let this board know that the energy and effort that you have put in is invaluable. I cannot quantify the amount of time and energy and focus it takes to really care. And that's not the words I wanted to use. But I know you guys give a lot in this capacity. And you know, we didn't know what we were getting in for, but now that we're here, we have a very unique shared realness, shared perspective. So thank you for being there and supporting me on my journey here. Could not have done it without you.
Thank you.
So that being said, I'm going to move us into closed session. That's agenda item 12. I'll let you take it from here. People know.
Okay, members of the public who are currently attending virtually, you are free to remain within the webinar. The recording, audio, and video will be paused, but again, you're free to remain inside of the webinar when we return to announce closed session actions and adjourn. With that being said, we will now pause the recording to move into closed session. It's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the cases have been updated. The board has been made aware of everything that has come to pass, and we are out of closed session. I'm asking for a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn. Never seconded.
Second.
Excellent. And we are adjourned.